guys, it's me again, Sitja Stuff, or as you may know me, Damaris. So it's been a while and I really apologize for that. I really wanted to make sure that this video was somewhat perfect. I also been very busy.
I went back to school and I have 2 jobs now, and I'm taking this skincare course on the side, and it's just been very hard
and time consuming, but I finally came around it and I decided, hey, what the heck, I'll make a video on skin. So this video is dedicated entirely to the anatomy and physiology of skin, part 1. So I hope you guys enjoy the video and we'll get started. Alright, so here we're going to start skin part 1. This is just a quick picture I wanted to show. So first we're going to talk about the important functions that make up the skin. So the skin is the human's body's biggest organ, performing many important functions, starting with regulating the body temperature. Then we also know it for having bacterial colonies on the surface, which form part of the immune system, so it's going to help us fight off any foreign bodies. We also know it as being one of the most important organs of elimination. So that just means that it helps us sweat out any minerals and waste products from the body. It acts as an environmental barrier. This means that it prevents our water-rich bodies from drying out. Then we have our sensory nerves, which are abundant in the skin. This is actually the best part because it makes it such an amazing organ for touch. It allows us to feel heat and cold, and this only happens because of the many nerve endings and cells with sensory functions that are in the skin. Lastly, our skin, when it's stimulated by any ultraviolet light, it produces a pigment called melanin, which is known for being the pigment that darkens the skin and protects it from any sun damage. The skin also has a limited capacity to absorb substances applied topically, and what's amazing about that is that it even produces its own moisturizer, which we know it as sebum. Sebum comes from special glands called sebaceous glands, so it's very important to know that. So now that we covered all of the functions, we're going to get into the layers of the skin. So the skin is roughly divided into 3 layers as shown in the picture. We have the epidermis, we have the dermis, and we have the hypodermis. So each of these are separated into 3 different layers, and they each have their own specific functions. It's very important to know that. The skin also contains an area called the basement membrane. The basement membrane is just a thin layer that sticks the epidermis to the dermis. And in parts of the skin, you also find a 5th layer, which is called the stratum lucidum, also known as the clear layer, which is only found in areas such as the bottoms of your feet and the palms of your hands. Now going into the layers of the epidermis itself, which we will find 5 specific layers that we will be talking about. So we're going to begin with the stratum corneum, which is also known as the horny layer. This consists mainly of the dry cells that are constantly shedding, which we're going to talk about later on in the video. And it's followed by the stratum lucidum, which we spoke about, also known as the clear layer. Then below that, we have the stratum granulosum, which we also known as granule layer. So here we find the keratinocytes, which form a granular layer as they travel from the base layer up. Underneath the stratum granulosum, we have the stratum spinosum, which we also know as the prickle cell layer. And finally, at the very end, we have the stratum basal or basale, depending on how you want to say it, which is also known as the basal layer, or some others call it the stratum germinativum, which is the deepest layer of the epidermis, and this is where the new plump keratinocyte cells are constantly forming. Now moving on to the cells of the epidermis. So the brick cells, we call them the brick-like cells because they're closely compact together, are the keratinocytes, which build up the biggest part of the epidermis, and that's about 90% of the cells. As you can see in the picture over here, all of the yellow circles, those make up all of the keratinocytes. Keratinocytes produce keratin, which is the tough fibrous protein, and its main purpose is to provide protection against any various external damages, which include UV rays, bacteria, fungi, and heat. So over here we have the Langerhans cells as well. They have tentacle-like arms attached to their bodies. These cells are present in the skin at least 2 to 4%. They're the skin's defense cells, so they protect you from anything foreign, any foreign bodies or any substances. Basically what happens is that whenever they detect foreign substances, they pick them up with the tentacles and they take them to the deeper layer of the skin, all the way to the lymph glands, where they're eliminated. And if the skin is constantly being invaded by a chemical or a foreign body or substances, what happens is that after a time, the body actually starts to produce antibodies that will create an allergic reaction at the point of entry. Now going into melanocytes, which is the brownish color at the bottom. These cells are responsible for the color of our skin, meaning that they produce melanin, which is the pigment that protects us from any damage caused by ultraviolet rays. So when we tan, melanin will swallow the ultraviolet rays and protects the skin from the damages. That's actually how it occurs. Also, it's really important to know darker skin doesn't contain more melanocytes. It's that it has a more active melanocytes and they produce more melanin pigment. The picture on the right sums up all the layers and main cells of the epidermis. So you can see the keratinocytes, the Langerhans cells responsible for immune system defenses. You can see the melanocytes and their secretion, which we know as melanin. And you can also see the Merkel cells that are associated with the sense of touch, which are the blue circles on the top right corner that we did not talk about, but we will. But now we're going to get on to desquamation, which is very, very important. Alright, so we're going to talk about desquamation now. As I mentioned, very, very important. So we're going to understand how the skin renews itself throughout the 28-day period. What happens is that at the bottom, the fresh, plump new keratinocytes are formed in the basal layer, which is there in the chart. And what happens is they start to make their way up through all of the other layers of the epidermis, and they leave some of the cells behind, which continue to divide through mitosis, and they multiply and constantly create more and more and more cells. Throughout the journey of these keratinocytes, this process, they become flattened and they lose their plumpness and they start to dry out by the time they reach the upper levels, which as shown in the chart. The dead cells are called the squames that form the stratum corneum, or aka the horny layer. And as we mentioned, our skin is shedding all of the time, so the squames fall off, and this process altogether is called desquamation. So I highly suggest that if you want to prevent breakouts or anything like that, to change your bed sheets and your pillows every 2 weeks at least, to make sure that you're not sleeping in dead skin cells, because that's basically what's going on here. So for the keratinocytes to reach the stratum corneum layer for the basal layer, they need approximately 4 weeks for that to happen. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the dermis, which houses many important components, as you can see in this picture. So first, we're going to look at the hair and hair muscles that actually force the hairs to stand up when we are cold. The idea behind that is to basically trap the air next to the skin, which is the warm air. Next, we find the sebaceous glands that are responsible for producing the skin's natural moisturizer, which we call sebum. Then we also find many, many nerves and nerve endings in the skin. These nerves turn the skin into a sensory organ, which have the ability to feel touch, pain, heat, and cold. So pain is actually the body's warning sign that something's wrong, and so the skin is an important factor in protecting the body from injury. We also have blood vessels in the dermis that deliver the nutrition to the top layer of the skin to the epidermal cells. And we have sweat glands and sweat ducts, which are found all over the skin, not just in the armpit, but also in our palms and the soles of our feet. There are two types of sweat glands in the body, which we're going to talk a little bit about. It's the eccrine sweat glands, which have tiny openings in the skin. They also help regulate body temperature. And we also have the apocrine glands, which open into the hair follicles instead of into our pores. And their odor secretion can be very, very bad, but this is what causes us to sweat and stink. But it's very, very, very important. So, all of these important structures are surrounded by a tough fiber known as collagen. Collagen fiber bind water, giving the skin all of its strength that it needs. There's a lot of things that you can do in terms of your diet to ensure your collagen levels remain high. Within the skin, the collagen is made of special fibroblasts, which is a special cell that makes up the collagen. Fibroblasts are really important in healing any wounds because they basically rebuild the skin back together. Underneath the dermis, there's a thick fatty layer called the hypodermis. The hypodermis contains coarse bundles of collagen and is mainly composed of fat cells, which we call adipocyte cells. These fat cells provide padding, which help prevent injuries to the underlying muscles. They also provide insulation as the metabolic activity in the fat cells releases heat, and they have cosmetic and energy reserving functions. So the appearance of the skin is affected by the hypodermis, and it changes in fat content and hydration levels can show up as lumpy or wrinkled skin. So to summarize, the main functions of the hypodermis are energy reserves from the fat storage in the tissue, the insulation for metabolic activity in adipocytes that releases heat. Padding the deeper layer of fatty tissues helps prevent injury to the underlying muscles. And cosmetic, the appearance of the skin is affected by the subcutaneous layer. And fun fact, in healthy males, the area of the skin is actually the largest volume of fat in the body, and the subcutaneous tissue is involved in the metabolism of adipocytes and the synthesis and breakdown of any oils. So finally, we are at the last slide, and we're going to do a quick review of everything we kind of went over. So with the epidermis and the keratinocytes, the skin is basically holding the body contents together. They are the outer covering, they help us stop losing too much water, therefore they help with our hydration, which is very, very important for us. The epidermis and sebum, which is the natural moisturizing secretion from the sebaceous glands, provide us with waterproofing protection. We also have UV protection from melanocytes that produce our melanin pigment, which give us a tan, and it's protective from the UV light. This liquid pigment surrounds all of our keratinocytes and prevents them from being damaged by the UV light. We also talked about the Langerhans cells, which have tentacle-shaped cells that look like starfish, and they reach their arms out to grab foreign bodies from the surface of the skin, and they take them down to the lymph nodes and the blood, where they are sent out of the body. So here I really want to mention, so it also shows us that what you put on your skin can actually end up in your body, because that's effectively what the Langerhans cells do. If you read back to what I said, if you go back in the video, you're going to hear me say over and over that the Langerhans cells send things down to the lymph nodes and the blood, and the lymph nodes are part of the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system is our body system known for detox. And if you're putting things on your body that are harmful, it's going to go into your body and essentially harm your body in one way or another. So keep note of that. Then the blood vessels in the dermis regulate the body's temperature. They're the feedback systems within the body and will activate when the skin and blood vessels in the skin feel a difference in temperature. The epidermis houses Merkel cells, which are pressure-sensitive cells that allow the skin to be a sensory organ. And the nerve endings in the dermis are responsible for pain and injury warnings, which are very important for us on a daily basis. And finally, the epidermis houses bacteria, as we know, good bacteria, called commensal bacteria, and they form the front line of our immune system. Their job is to colonize the surface of the skin and prevent pathogenic bacteria from colonizing the skin. So there you have it. That is part 1 of anatomy and physiology of skin. All of the things I mentioned today are very, very important, and I really, really suggest anybody to know a little bit about their skin and take more care of it, whether it's through products or through your lifestyle. Well, I hope you guys liked the video. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and stay tuned for more videos.